My name's Nick Ridley. I'm a professional dog photographer and I'm Gundog Editor for the Sporting Gun magazine. Those regular readers and people who visit my YouTube channel will know all about young Ted here, and this is the second of my videos of training with Ted. In the first video of the series, I showed you some of the equipment that I use to train young Ted here, and something that was brand new to me was the Placeboard. Now, a lot of people have been using a similar kind of thing, especially the assistance dogs, hearing dogs, guide dogs, dogs for good. They use a mat to get their dogs to settle, and in principle the Placeboard is exactly the same kind of thing. In gun dog training, it's brand new. For the last 2 or 3 years there's been an incredible surge in people using it, and I did a lot of research both online, DVDs, read about it, but the thing that really convinced me to try it was I was doing a series of articles with Jeremy Organ of Edgegrove Gun Dogs, and he used it to train his spaniels, and when I actually saw it in practice I certainly thought it would be a good idea and something that I would like to use to train Ted right from a puppy. One of the advantages of using a Placeboard is that you can actually start training from a very young age. Training, in fact, is probably the wrong kind of word. It's actually called conditioning. So you're not really training the puppy, you're conditioning it to a set of behaviours. And I started Ted off from about 9 weeks old in the back garden, put the Placeboard down and just tried to encourage him to sit on it, and that was the beginning of his conditioning of the Placeboard. When I was doing my research for using a Placeboard to train Ted, I read a lot, I looked online and I watched some DVDs, and I came to a couple of conclusions, and my conclusions were based mainly on the body language of the dogs. For me, I much preferred that Placeboard was a happy place for a dog. Only good things happened when it was on that Placeboard. That might be a stroke, a treat, a dummy, didn't really matter, but it had to be a nice place for it. My other conclusion from my observations was sometimes the dog would stay on the board because if it came off of it, something negative happened, and that wasn't my way of training. The very first step I took was getting Ted to sit on the board, and as I said, I did that when he was 8 weeks old in the back garden on the Placeboard. Quite simple. When he was running around, I'd just call him, Ted, 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 sit. Okay. Once he'd done that behaviour, he'd get a stroke. Good lad. Good boy. Yeah, good lad. I might give him a treat. I'm not against using treats for gun dogs. The only thing I wouldn't use them for is when they come back on a retrieve. But already, over time, he was beginning to learn that the Placeboard was a good place to be. I could then move on, just moving slightly further away, walking around. He's not going to come off the board because he thinks he's going to get a good treat. Go back, another nice reward. There's nothing negative about it, and that's the way I prefer to train. A common question that I ask actually and inquired about is how do you get the dogs to come off of the Placeboard as their training progresses? And there are various ways of doing it. I came to my method, not saying it's the right one, but it's the one I use for Ted. What I did is even when he was young, I would sometimes sit him on the board and I would sometimes sit him off of the board. So he just got used to doing both things, and that made the transgression when I needed to work him away from the Placeboard a lot easier. So what were the main benefits of using a Placeboard to train Ted? Well, I think there was numerous, and I'd certainly use it again. The main thing is when I started to get him to basically sit and stay. He was already really used to the board, so I was quite able to start to walk away, and he wasn't going to creep, he wasn't going to follow, because he was quite happy sat on the board. Good lad, good boy. The other thing is, because there's a place there, I can tell whether he's moved. My other cockers, every time I would leave them, they would creep off, and I'd think, oh, are they in the same place? Are they not in the same place? I know if he moves off of that board. So as he got a bit older, I would increase my distance. Still quite happy to sit there. I think it's psychological with the dogs as well. Not quite sure how it works, but the fact that they're sat on a slight platform just seems to keep them a bit steadier. One of the other advantages I found by using a placeboard was actually getting the dog to come back nice and straight. Now initially that's just coming back and sitting up in front of you. Well, of course later on that's going to develop into his delivery of his retrieves. The way I did that was, already said he was quite happy to sit on the grass, so I'll take him out. Ted, sit, sit, good lad, stay there. Then I would walk back to the long part of the board, so I was standing at the back of him, and when I was ready I'd call him, Ted, nice sit straight in front of you. Now already, because of the shape of the placeboard, the dog is coming back and sitting straight at you. I also found that getting Ted to hold on to something while he was sitting on the placeboard was a lot easier than trying to do it on a piece of grass. He seemed just to focus and concentrate a little bit more. So I'd already done a lot of retrieving work with him as a puppy, with balls and things, just get him to come back to me. But I wanted to develop his hold. So when he came back, he would actually hold something rather than spit it out or run around or anything else. So again, I'd start off with something really light. These aero dummies are really good for this. And I would just get him to hold it. It must be psychological. The fact that they're sitting on that board, they're quite happy to sit there and hold something. And then I would just increase a bit of steadiness by moving away slightly. Good boy, not be too quick to take that off of him. Everything's nice and relaxed, nice and calm. They seem to just steady down, become calm when they're on these placeboards. Good lad, good boy. Leave it. Again, a very hands-off way of training. Good boy. Well, of course, once you've got them to hold, you can then move on to develop the actual retrieving. Obviously, once I've built the stages up of Ted's placeboard training, so he would sit, he would stay, he would recall back on there, he would hold a dummy. Ultimately, what I'm looking for is to put all that together in a very simple retrieve. Get out. Good boy, good boy. Very relaxed, very quiet. Very simple and soft way of training. No pressure on the dog at all. You're a good lad. Some techniques of using placeboards actually use more than one, up to 4, sending from one to the other, to the other, to the other. I looked at that, and actually for my training, I felt that I didn't need to use 4 placeboards. I could make do with 1, and that's exactly what I did. And the other time they can become very useful is when you start doing some directional work. But I realised that I had to develop another way of using them if I was just going to use one board. So when I started doing my left and rights with Ted, we already had the board. He was already sat. Showed you there, we've built up from the sit, the stay, the hold, the recall, and of course the delivery. So when we started doing some directional work, I'd sit him up on the board, just one board, put a dummy out. Now the key to this is, if I was to send him now, the chances are he would go out and come back to me. And that's not what I want him to do at this stage. What I want him to do is still come back and give me that nice delivery. So what I did, give him the hand signal, and then I go back to the end of the board. Get out, get out. Back to the end of the board, comes up, and I get my good delivery again. So already I'm introducing now left and rights. Stay there. But maintaining my delivery. Get out, go back to the board. He's going to come back, he's going to deliver. Another really useful thing I found by using the placeboard was when I started to introduce the stop whistle to Ted. Now I'd always done this traditionally by having the dog on a lead, be walking it to heel, blow my whistle, pull the lead back, and obviously that would be a repetitive thing. Quite a hands-on, quite a physical way of doing it. And I like this whole idea of using a placeboard which is hands-off and a lot softer approach. So I thought about how to introduce the stop whistle, and I came to the conclusion that I could do it as he came back with the retrieve, because he was going to sit on the board anyway. That's when I would introduce my stop whistle to start with. And it worked quite well actually. I've already built up, as I've said before, to the sit, the stay, the hold, the recall, done all that. So now we're going to introduce another element, the stop whistle. Get out. Now he's not sitting because of the stop whistle, he's sitting because he's come back onto the placeboard. But by association over a period of time, he learnt that when he came back, he heard that pip, that will become his stop or sit whistle when he's out. I've not been too quick, never was too quick to take his retrieves off of him. He's quite happy there to sit and hold him because the placeboard's a good place to be. Good lad, good boy. So that was basically how I trained Ted using a placeboard. It's not a magic tool, it's not something that's going to miraculously train your gun dog for you. There has to be a process, there has to be a building up of foundations, each step has to be gradual. But if you ask me would I use it again, yes I would, without any shadow of a doubt. I think it's been a nicer way of training a dog. In some senses I'd say it's even a kinder way of training a dog. It helps to keep them a lot calmer, a lot steadier. And it's very much a hands-off way of training. If it's something you'd like to do, I'd really suggest that you go online, read about it, watch YouTube videos, buy DVDs, research it. But don't take all that for gospel. If you need to change things because it suits your way of training or indeed your dog, don't be afraid to do that. Each dog and each trainer is different, and that's certainly how I've managed it with Ted.